Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the series of Cordillera Textiles Project webinars or CordiTex Textile Talks. So we are pleased to have with us a very notable writer, researcher, and cultural worker from Palway, Ilocos Norte. So the Cordillera Textile Project is an interdisciplinary research based at UP Baguio. And we have been studying textiles from Northern Luzon and beyond. And we have these webinars wherein we invite textile scholars, weavers, and cultural bearers to share their knowledge about textiles. So previously we had topics on textile conservation. We had cultural bearers from Manobo, Ifugao, and Bagobo to talk about their traditional textiles. So this time, on Ilocos, Abel Iloko, or Textiles from the Ilocos, and next month will be the confluence of Iloko and Itneg textiles. So without further ado, we would like to introduce our speaker this morning. Bernard Joseph E. Guerrero is a cultural worker based in Paway, Ilocos Norte. He is a cultural heritage consultant to various local government units, as well as to the Department of Tourism in Region 1. In the field of Philippine textiles, he has done documentation research for CordiTex and delivered talks on Philippine textiles, with the most recent one at the International Flores de Mayo Conference, organized by the FAURA Project and the University of the Philippines, Manila. Two of his articles on Philippine weaves have made it to the front cover story of the Philippines Graphics, Tony and Nick magazine. He has been working closely with the weaving group of Magdalena Gamayo since 2016. Let me just share the photograph of BJ. Okay, so. And he also enrolled this group of Magdalena Gamayo in the Anti-Poverty Alleviation Program by CELO, which supported the members during the pandemic when they had no income. At the time, the Philippine project was recognized to be one of the two best performing communities, other one being in Brazil, among the hundreds of communities worldwide supported by the foundation, and was given the opportunity to present the beneficiary community in a global summit held in Paris in 2021. He also manages the Oriental Weaves, is a textile consultant for Hibla.ph, and is a member of the International Council for Monument and Sites in the Philippines. So this is VJ, our textile consultant, cultural worker, writer, and curator. And we also would like to invite everyone to the recent show that he curated called Inubon Adayaw, or String of Honor, the life and works of Manilikanang Bayan, Magdalena Gamayo. It will be opening today, this afternoon, and hope you can visit that at the NCCA Gallery. So without further ado, we would like to welcome BJ, or Bernard Joseph Esposa Guerrero.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ikin. That was very kind. Before I start my talk, I just want to make sure that my audio is audible. Okay lang po ba?
Yes, it's audible.
Sige po. Ma'am, if we could go on to the slides, please. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank Dr. Ikin Amores, a very good and a very reliable friend, a mentor of sort of mine in my textile journey, for being supportive and being able to give me this platform to share with you my knowledge and my story with Lola Magdalena Gamayo. So Lola Magdalena and I share a lot of things. One is that we're both Ilocanos, and it might even be a possibility that I'm related to her distantly. So when we talk about Lola Magdalena Gamayo, we're not only talking about the foremost living weaver in the Philippines. Perhaps I even would like to amend that statement. We're basically talking about one of the most important cultural bearers, traditional artists that our country currently has. As the invitation to the talk mentioned, she is fast approaching 100. And there's no better time than to celebrate her life, her works, her legacies, her role in developing and shaping Filipino culture than now. After all, we've waited for so long. Lola Magdalena Gamayo was only conferred the award in 2012. At that time, among all the national living treasures, she was the oldest to be conferred at. But if you look at it, siya din lang yung nakapagtagal. Most of them usually pass away in their 80s or even in their 70s. But look at her, she's 99 at the moment and still going strong. Still weaving every day. In fact, she's able to finish 1 to 1.5 yards per day. So that's a magnificent feat, especially considering her age. Normally, when weavers reach 80, they usually just stop weaving. But in her case, it's actually part of her lifestyle and it's part of her devotion. So the talk that I'll be sharing with you today is entitled "Weaving Across Time: The Life and Works of Manlilikha ng Bayan Magdalena Gamayo." The Manlilikha ng Bayan is the award conferred to the premier traditional artists in the Philippines. In English, ito yung tinatawag nating the National Living Treasure. And it's actually an award given by the Office of the President himself. So right now in the Philippines, in the field of weaving, there are only two left, in fact. We're talking about Magdalena Gamayo, who weaves in Abel, and then the other one down south, who will also be gracing the event this afternoon, is Estelita Bantilan, the mat weaver from the Blaan community. But in this talk, let's focus on Magdalena Gamayo. In the next slide, let's try to understand who she is. Let's try to see what her background is, and probably even make a guess as to why she became who she is today. Magdalena Gamayo is, as I told you a while ago, an Ilocano. And in Ilocos, it's one of the northernmost provinces in the Philippines. It's highly agricultural. If you've seen her place, it's really surrounded by mountains and farmlands. She is an Inabel master weaver. What exactly is Inabel? Inabel can be geographically typified as the textiles woven by the lowland northern Philippine Ilocanos. So we're talking about provinces that include, first and foremost, Ilocos Norte, Ilocos Sur, La Union, and then some pockets of weaving communities are being revived in Cagayan, Isabela, and even Pangasinan. But when we're talking about the largest quantity of weavers, historically and presently, Ilocos Norte would hold that. And the town where she's from happens to be in Pinili, and which is in Ilocos Norte. But sige ma'am, dun lang muna tayo sa first slide muna. But it's also telling that her town today, which is known as Pinili, is still part of Paway before. So, and what exactly is Paway? I mean, for those people who are into weaving, I'm sure they've heard of Paway weaves. Paway has always been the premier weaving town in Ilocos Norte. So much so that during the galleon trade, it has actually seen the largest volume of textiles exported to Mexico and Spain. And as I said a while ago, during the heyday of Magdalena Gamayo, a large part of her town was still Paway. And that's the reason why most people from Ilocos Norte, as exemplified by Lola Magdalena Gamayo, are very good and proficient in all the categories of Inabel. So they just don't know, hindi lang binako ang kanilang ginagawa, hindi lang pinilian. They also have other rare techniques, some of which are already extinct, like for example, the bitbituka, the leno, and even burburo, for example. But nowadays, Lola Magdalena Gamayo is closely associated to the impalagto, which is known to be the very specific technique that emanates from the town of Pinili, something that even from the weavers from Paway cannot do. So she is also a farmer. Lola Magdalena, suffice to say, did not receive formal education at all. So the way that it works for her during her younger years is that they would wake up really early, go to the farmland, plant rice, corn, tobacco. Those are the main crops in her area. And in the afternoon, when it gets hotter, they go back to their homes. And it's such a closely knit community that in their village, it's basically a village of women weavers. Ang mga babae naman kasi, 'di ba, hindi naman sila pwedeng magtagal sa mga palayan. They cannot go outside to the jungle, to the forest to get some wood. So they stay at home. And that has always been the setup. The women stay at home so they could do things other than weaving within that same time. So they tend the house, they tend the kids, and during their free time, they weave. So weaving at the time is not really a full-time job, but it's something that they can do during the times that they have that they are free. So Lola Magdalena has been lucky that her mom was a weaver. Her aunts, most especially, were really, really good master weavers. And she really took interest in studying how they do it. So according to her, every afternoon until late evening, she would just look at them, see them, observe them, ask questions from them, how they do this technique, how they do this pattern, and that's how she learned. It was only when she was 16 when she was finally gifted her own Inabel loom, which was crafted using salamage wood, and it really made her happy because sabi nga niya, she could finally express herself. She could, oh, of course, there are known patterns existing all around her, but she wanted to explore new patterns as well. And in fact, that's what makes her a master weaver. She knows how to recreate and visualize patterns, even though these patterns are old. And we will show some examples later on. Aside from being a weaver and being a farmer, we go now to the most important identifier of Lola Magdalena Gamayo. In 2012, she was conferred with the National Living Treasure Award, or the Manlilikha ng Bayan. It is an award that many people don't seem to appreciate and to get as of yet. And sometimes they don't really know what it means. Some people think that it's only secondary to the National Artist Award. But in reality, if you look at it, they go hand in hand. They are of equal ranks. So the National Artist and the National Living Treasure Award enjoy the same benefit and the same stature when it comes to culture and arts in the Philippines. The only difference is that the national artists are dedicated to the fine arts, while the Manlilikha ng Bayan are dedicated to the Philippine traditional arts. In fact, if I may borrow the words of Dr. Felipe De Leon, who once headed the NCCA, he had this a very valid argument in suggesting that kung tutuusin mo, the real national artists are really the Manlilikha ng Bayan. Because when you think about it, they don't just represent themselves. And more importantly, they're not only accountable to themselves, rather they're accountable to their community and to their culture. Why? Because, you know, a national artist can just stroke some few colors in a canvas, and that makes it a masterpiece. And lucky for them, they could easily sell that for millions. You know, 2 hours of work, national artist, museum piece na yan. But then for the Manlilikha ng Bayan, sometimes you don't even know them. You don't even hear them. They make a certain artwork, especially, for example, yung Ambalang Ausalin, her counterpart in Basilan, who died in 2012, a simple headscarf would even take her 2 months to weave. And at the end of the day, the most that she could earn is only like about $200 or $300, you know. So there is something that has to be done in the way we appreciate the works of national living treasures and the rest of the traditional artists that the Philippines has. So the Manlilikha ng Bayan is really a prestigious award, and as of now, there are only 2 living weavers conferred with the award. And if I'm not mistaken, 1, 2, 3, tatlong lalaki in other fields, hat making, chanting, dances, and silver work from Pampanga. So that's Lola Magdalena Gamayo. The photo that I have, ma'am, dun muna tayo sa second photo. The photo that I have is quite telling. In fact, there's a running joke. Every time my friends see the photo, the second photo. It's actually my first photo with Lola Magdalena when I saw her in 2016. And at the time, she was really already old. Okay, she was probably 94, and I was in my 20s, I think. And it's just funny that when you look at us now, I probably would have aged even more than she did. The way she looked like back in 2016 to how she looks like now has not really changed. The vigor, the hard work, the dedication, the passion, the way she talks, the way she shares her knowledge, it's still in the same intensity. It's just amazing if you get to meet her in person. It really looks like she's not 99. We go on to the next slide, please. In the next slide, Dr. Ikin.
Hello, BJ.
Hi, ma'am. Yes po.
Okay. This is the first slide, second slide. That's correct.
Punta na po tayo sa, yes, that slide. Yes po.
This slide, sorry.
Yes, ma'am. Sorry for that. I happen to be in transit right now, so wala akong laptop na dala. So, again, she's from a rural farming village, and this actually speaks a lot of her artwork. If there's one thing that unifies traditional artists, they don't really, they're so humble and they're so simple. In fact, one can say that their worldview is so small, but at the same time, it's so detailed. Yun yung oxymoron doon. Most of them haven't even traveled outside of their islands. They haven't seen the rest of the world before they were awarded. Probably they haven't even really talked too much to a lot of people. But that's something that we should look into. That's something that we should study because again, they represent the community that they're in. They represent their culture. And knowing that Lola Magdalena Gamayo comes from a highly rural farming village in Ilocos Norte, like out from the highway, it still takes like an hour to get to her place. It's really ridiculous. It's really far. Um, uh, the way she sees the world and the way she appreciates the world are actually manifested in the types of designs that she does. And we'll go into deeper detail on that later on when I show you the samples of her work. In her area, aside from rice and tobacco, they also used to grow a lot of cotton. And this is the reason why she was very, very good in the use of cotton, something that many weavers nowadays would complain about. Why? Because well, as it should be, if we're talking about real Inabel, an authentic Inabel, it should be cotton, being true to the material used back in the day. But nowadays, we've seen massive changes in the materials being used. Nowadays, largely what's being used is polyester or polyester cotton at best. And many weavers complain about that because dealing with cotton is not only scarce, it's not only difficult to find, which is the reality that's confounding the Philippine textile industry at the moment, but in terms of production, it's also highly difficult because cotton easily snaps. And at the same time, since cotton is coarse, it takes longer time to weave because the time that the shuttlecock goes from one end to the other end of the loom is slower because of the friction made. Compared to the use of polyester cotton, medyo mas glossy siya, mas smoother. So the way that the shuttlecock swings is faster than cotton. The photos that we have here are basically what I tried to highlight in the exhibit. These are the three oldest blankets that I could get from Lola Magdalena Gamayo. And I was happy when she actually graced me with it when I asked her na parang, I really want to showcase something that you've done when you were at your prime, because nowadays she's limited to simple patterns. That's expected because she's 99. So these are really fine work. The one in the foreground, the black one, is really amazing. And if you have time to visit the exhibit, that's basically the force the resistance of the exhibit. So these are all binacol, and all of them are made of hand spun cotton, except for the colored yarns, which are made of bonel, which was quite in fashion in Ilocos and even in the Cordilleras in the 70s up to 80s. So we go on to the next slide, please. So recently, Lola Magdalena Gamayo was gifted with an Abel weaving center. It actually looks like a tobacco warehouse, which is quite a lot in Ilocos. So it's made of bricks. Before that, she was weaving in a simple barong-baro. You could hardly call it a structure, to be honest. It's basically made of bamboo and iron sheets, where it's really warm inside. And nowadays they get to enjoy a better, more airy weaving center. And the weaving center also exhibits some of her works, like the first photo to your left. So it's basically hand with the names on it, so that people can easily identify the names of the pattern. And beside the weaving center, there was a cotton plantation that was installed in the hopes that we could revive the cotton industry back in Ilocos region. Again, the Ilocos region used to be the #1 cotton producer back in the day, which only stopped when the World War II took place, and all the cotton plantation in the region were decimated. So that's also one of the reasons why the weavers shifted to other materials, because cotton just wasn't there anymore at the time. So they're trying to revive it. And while the plantation is robust, cotton threads are there. The biggest difficulty that we're having right now is convincing the weaver to actually use cotton, because again, as I've said, in the past 20 or even 30 years, they're so used with polyester that it seems like going back to cotton is something that's hard to imagine for them. But we're getting there, and I hope that it will be a successful one. In the next slide, we go on to the main works of Lola Magdalena Gamayo. Ano ba yung kanyang mga patterns na ginagawa? So, if of course, the most famous Inabel category that we know is the pinilian. And that's being done in the uplands, in the lowlands, Ilocos Sur. In my town in Paway, we have a version of it called sinukitan. But Lola Magdalena Gamayo, unfortunately, does not know that weaving technique. The weaving techniques that she knows, as far as I know, would be the plain weaves, the binakol. She also knows kundiman, which is basically the weave of Paway. Again, owing to the fact that a part of her town was Paway before, so she also knows how to do that. She knows blades. And I think I've also seen a specimen na leno, yung gawa niya. And she does multi-heddle, and the most important one would be the impalagto, which, as I've said a while ago, is almost synonymous to the village that she comes from. So the first photo are 3 examples of binakol that she personally wove, different patterns. The first one with the pink stripes is the sinankuros with kohon. On the upper part, if I'm not mistaken, is the sinansabong, or the flower. And the upper part is obviously the quintessential kusikos, the whirlpool. Something that you can never mistake as a pattern that comes from anywhere else. It's definitely an Ilocano pattern. The other photo would be a collection of impalagto. The impalagto differs in that, in a way that it is not a plain weave, so it just doesn't use 2 pedals. It uses 4 to 5 pedals depending on the pattern. So you can just imagine the skill that the weaver needs to have in order to manipulate the 5 pedals, and in order to be consistent with the pattern that they want to do. It differs from pinilian, or supplementary weft, in a way that it is not a weft emanating pattern. Instead, it is a warp emanating pattern. So the loops and the jumps, this is basically technical na, no? The way it is woven is that um, yung uh, uh, stretched thread yung gumagalaw, hindi yung weft. So it's a warp technique, and many patterns can be generated out of it. But as you can see, medyo predictable yung kanyang outcome. It's basically linear. It's a serial. It's a series of patterns. The first one, the purple, is what you call the Sinan Alson. It's called Sinan Alson, or the mortar and pestle, because it represents again, they are agricultural people. It's something that they see every day when they pound corn, when they pound beans, when they pound rice. So the Alson is the mortar and pestle, and basically the X would be yung pestle na kinuros. So it's basically a representation of two vessels na, di ba, pag nagpa-pound yung dalawang tao, you could imagine that the X design can be realized. The O naman would be the mouth of the mortar. The green is what they call the bola bola. It's difficult to do this because you have to be keen in perfecting the round edges. And again, in weaving, it's largely geometric. So for you to be able to do the round pattern takes a lot of skills as well. And in this particular example, you call this with liston. In the weaving community, they call it liston. It's a term that I just encountered recently, because what we would call in Paway as rayadillos, or in the uplands as cantarines, the lines, they call it liston. And then the upper part naman, the black one, is what you call the tawa-tawa. So it's supposed to be inspired by Capiz windows, something that, again, they see in the houses where they traditionally live. Let's get deeper into the patterns that Lola Magdalena generates. So again, Binacol is the first photo and Impalagto is the second one. Both of them are in Abel, because many people are usually confused. Maraming nagsasabi, ay, hindi yan in Abel, Binacol yan. But we're basically talking about the general term and the more specific terms. So Inabel would be any weave coming from the north, and then Binacol is a category of Inabel, and Impacto as such is another category of Inabel. We go on to the next slide, please. In the next slide, I'm showing you two of her simplest weaves. So these simple weaves are, as the name suggests, they are really simple. It's something that most weavers can do. So in this slide, we're looking at a very farm-inspired pattern. They call it the balatong, or the sinan balatong, or the sinan munggo, sinan mung beans. So it's rendered in two colors, red and blue, and it differs in a way a little bit from your plain plaid, because there is a conscious effort for the intersections to be round, para magmukha siyang parang munggo talaga. So it's really amazing how they do that. Again, it's easy to make plaids, but to go into those details, it really takes a lot of mastery. And then the inunsoy, it's another term that they use. Again, for other weaving communities, stripes would be called cantarines, rayadillos, or even binandera. But for her weaving community, it's called inunsoy. And and for me, it's always important to label them in the way that the weavers label them. It's a sign of respect, it's a sign of courtesy, and at the same time, it's also an effort to continue the legacy of the original names and the original patterns that they have been doing for the longest time. So these are example of plain weaves. It only takes 2 pedals, and these are usually normally worn as dresses, as shirts. That's why ang generic term din dito would be ito ay yung ganitong typology ng textiles for us in Ilocos would be the inyaway. Inyaway means the dresses or the styles of the people from the far-flung areas. Away means remote places. So these are the kinds of textiles that the people in the community of Lola Magdalena would wear. The plaids would be preferred by the women, and the stripes would be preferred by men. We go on to the next slide, please. In the next slide, we go on to a progression of the simple weave. We go on to the pinnacle. And all of these photos that I'm showing to you right now are all exhibited. It's part of the exhibition that's going to open this afternoon. The first photo in pale brown and white is what you call the cruz ken cajon. Cruz and cajon is basically the cross and the boxes. And for those who have met Lola Magdalena Gamayo or have known her at least, you would know that she is very religious. In fact, one of the things that she will never fail to mention when you get to have a conversation with her is the phrase, tiasi ni Apo, tiasi ni Apo, which basically means by the grace of God. And it's so nice that to hear these and to see her face being reflected on the weaves that she does. So again, it's a cross pattern with boxes. And in fact, last year she donated to the National Museum another cross in Abel with liston. It's a neat one and neatly done. And another sample of which is also part of the exhibition that we're having in NCCA. Kineleng-keleng, as you can see, looks like boxes, looks like squares. And what exactly does kineleng-keleng mean? Again, we go back to her origin, to her background. She is from a farming village. And kineleng-keleng basically refers to the parcels of farmlands. So, anong tawag dun sa Ilocano? Nakalimutan ko na. Plots, yung mga partitions sa farm. So, again, they are able to express that in their weaves. And I think that that's the beauty of weavers. Again, they are traditional artists. And as artists, they have to be creative and they have to be inspired. And with the limited world that they have, they get inspiration with whatever they see. If it's not from the lands, it's from their faith. If it's not from their faith, it's from flowers. It's from the wind. It's from the water, etc. And these are really good examples to demonstrate that philosophy and attitude. So the kineleng-keleng is a type of binakol. And as you can see, it already shows you the effect that is usually expected out of binakol, the op-artish effect. It looks like lumalaki or lumiliit siya. There's this receding effect as it gravitates towards the main focus, which is the white big square. So these are binakol, and these are works that she has made. We go on to the next slide po. We have two other binakol to show. And then these are two other binakol. The first one is what we call the sinan ikamen, and then the other one is what we call the sinan palid. Some other weavers call it paid, depending on where they come from, but they basically mean the same thing. Palid means paypay or fan. Ikamen for us would be the mat that they use to sleep on, the mat that they use to sit on. So it's quite simple, but again, it reflects the things that they see. So this is a binakol in teal and white, and it just shows you the simple and humble life that they have. Again, what they see, they try to replicate in their weaves, and that is just amazing. As for the sinanpalid, the sinanpalid can basically be characterized as 1/4 of the kusikos repeated over and over. As you can see, a 1 quadrant of it, kung ginawa mo siyang, kung isimulate mo siya into 4 quadrants mirroring each other, it would form the kusikos. But in this case, it basically shows you a corner which has small patterns, and it gets bigger as it reaches the other end diagonally. So that's the sinanpalid. Given that orientation, it has this parang triangular effect or diamond effect, which is basically how they visualize the palid or the fan. The Sinanpalid already gives you a better idea on how the op art illusion or the op art effect that binakol can give. Um, the Sinanpalid can be generated in many ways, in fact. Yung oldest gawa niya was done differently. It's not only just the palid. She was able to put other patterns in it with a liston, a line separator, and which is something that not many people do nowadays. Of course, in the age where the goal of weaving is basically production, it's not really a means of self-expression largely. Nawawala na yung mga finer details. And those are the things that we would like to look at, and those are the things that we would like to highlight and probably even to revive. San ba nakukuha yung mga motivation na yan? San ba nakukuha yung inspiration na yan? Baka pwede nating ibigay ulit yun sa kanila rather than just telling them na mag-produce kayo ng maraming yarda at magbenta tayo, ang balik niyan is bayad. It has to be something more than that. In the next slide, we go on to the other category of weaving, the most famous weaving category that she's known for, the impalagto, or in English, the jumping technique. Again, it's a warp-driven pattern, and largely it's only her weaving community that does it. The first one is a variation of the Sinan Alson, but as you can see, it's not O yung pattern. Kung nakikita nyo, it's X and T. So iniba nila yung orientation ng pestle. It's no longer the X, but it's a cross. And it's rendered in two colors, beautifully done. And I think that's one of the gifts of Lola Magdalena Gamayo. Her color sensitivity is really, really good. She knows how to mix and match colors in ways that most weavers cannot do. In fact, even the younger weavers nowadays would still consult her. Maganda ba ang color combination na to? And she would give you her idea. She would say na parang, maybe it's better to take a darker shade. Maybe it's better to take a lighter shade. And I think that's a gift that not all weavers have. The ability to understand the nature of colors and how they interplay with one another. So this blue one is good for dresses. In fact, I have one woven from this textile, and it's neat. One of the things that makes their weaves, and this extends to the weavers that she was able to teach, is that the neatness is almost consistent. Hindi makakapal yung thread, so it's actually ideal for dresses, ideal for shirts, hindi mainit, and mataas yung kanyang thread count. And that's something that many people forget nowadays when they're buying textiles. Thread count is so important because it actually is an indicator, or it actually is the measure for the durability of the textile. The lesser the thread, the weaker it gets, the easier that the patterns will jump or will play eventually as you wash them over time. High thread count basically guarantees you longevity. Again, it's not impossible for you to see Inabel that lasts for 100 years. In fact, at home, we do have some Inabel woven still by my great-great-grandmother. So again, when they say that Inabel is versatile and durable, there's no joke to that. But again, at the same time, key to that is really knowing where to get those high-quality Inabel. The red one, the red textile, is what we call the mata-mata, or by some other weavers, they call it the bagas-bagas, or the grain of rice. Or again, by other weavers, they call it the eye. It really depends. But at least we're taking note of those opinion. For other weavers, they call it the mata-mata. For others, they call it the bagas. So it's also impalagto. It's quite simple, to be honest. It's basically just a plain ground weave with a small length of warp showing up floating in an alternating way. So kumbaga parang nagmumukha siyang checkered dito. So that's the mata-mata. As I've said a while ago, all of these are patterns that are easily seen by them, that they see every day. In the next photo, we have two examples of impalagto. The first one in purple and yellow is called the sinangayaman. The next one is the sinantawa-tawa. The sinangayaman is inspired by an insect. I'm not too sure now if it's technically an insect. I hope I hope hindi ako mate-technical dito. Gayaman is the centipede. So as you can see, it's not just a straight line. Rather, it shows you that it kind of tried to simulate yung mga paa ng centipede. That's why it has crevices along the sides. It's a beautiful one, and sometimes again these are just sample works. Sometimes they put crisscrossing lines. Sometimes they combine it with other motifs, which makes the textile more sophisticated. But for the purpose of showing to you how the gayaman as a pattern looks like, I think it's better for us to stick with this plain gayaman sample. So the gayaman is stripes, but again, it also exists in other permutations and other renditions. The tawa-tawa, the same as the tawa-tawa in the binakol. So the tawa-tawa as a pattern manifests itself not just in the binakol but also in the impalagto, is their interpretation of the windows. So again, it does look like the kapis ng window panes, lalo na sa mga old na bahay. But in this case, as I've told you, sometimes they add other patterns. Linagyan nila ng red liston or red line. But to make it more sophisticated, even in the red line, they put a breaker na white element. So again, this is the beauty of a work of someone who knows the textile, who understands color, and who understands the loom. They could generate as much pattern, they could recreate pattern, they could reimagine pattern, or they could actually create a new one altogether. So all of these are in the exhibit, and yes, that's the Sinan Tawa-Tawa, and that's the Sinan Gayaman. We go on to the next slide. The next one would be the most famous pattern to come out of the roster of patterns that Lola Magdalena Gamayo and the rest of our weaving community is able to produce. This is called the Inubon Asabong. The photo that we have is Lola Magdalena Gamayo. That was taken in 2021. So she is showing then her newly woven kusikos. If I'm not mistaken, that's a 5 kusikos blanket. So the detail is are really minute. You can just imagine limang circles she's only using an 18 inches reed size. So maliit lang yung kanyang tela kasi maliit na siya eh. Hindi na niya kaya yung mga mahabang tela, maliliit lang. So for her to be able to fit 5 circles within 18 inches is just really amazing. So again, that's her. That's how she looks like 2 years ago. But I can almost guarantee you that that's how she looks like still. Pandemic period po yan, kaya may mask siya noon. Pero kung pumupunta naman ako doon, hindi niya ako tinataboy noon. The central photo is the Inubon na Sabong. The Inubon na Sabong, many would claim is her masterpiece. But in closer conversation with Lola Magdalena Gamayo, she was able to admit to me that she cannot claim ownership to the pattern. Ang sabi niya sa akin is that it's something that she has seen already before. And she liked it so much that she tried to recreate it herself. No one taught her. Nag-widow siya. As in talagang she tried to replicate it. So again, when we talk about the origin of the pattern, it's usually a mistake to say na parang ginawa ni Lola Magdalena Gamayo, because Lola Magdalena Gamayo herself told me that hindi niya yan original na pattern, pero trinay niyang inimitate ang pattern na yan. Malamang pinaganda niya na niya. Ang nakita lang niya noon was just one line of the Inubon na Sabong, and then she made it more, she made it richer by placing 3 crisscrossing lines. 3, as you can see, the yellow lines are 3, the pink lines are 3. And it's actually inspired by a very Filipino not Filipino, but a very Ilocano thing to do when we were younger. In fact, I wouldn't be ashamed that when I was young, I was doing this as well during the times that we have no better things to do. And I guess Dr. Ikinamores would have done this when she was younger as well. What we would do as kids back then was we get the santan flower, and after sucking the sweet nectar in the flower, we try to make a string of the petals of the santan. And a sample of which is the photo to your right. That's basically the inubon asabong. It's a chain of santan flowers. And Lola Magdalena said that that's what the inubon na sabong is, at least from her interpretation. A string of flowers. And the string of flowers, again, is very difficult because largely the impalagto technique, as I've said a while ago, is warp emanating pattern. In the inubon na sabong, as you can see, it's crisscrossing. So it's not just the warp that's carrying the pattern. In this special case, the weft is also carrying the pattern. So sabay yan. That's why mukha siyang simple, sa totoo lang, pero the technique used is difficult because at some point, the warp and the weft has to meet with only one single thread separating them. So calculations are tough, and at the same time, the skills to be able to do that strategic positioning is also quite telling. So that's the Inuban na Sabong. The Inuban na Sabong is an original Inuban na Sabong made by her, is on display at the National Museum. Lola Magdalena doesn't do this anymore, sadly, because again, it's difficult. And it's not like we could force an old lady to tire herself in making something like that. So again, ang kanyang ginagawa na lang ngayon are simple binakol weaves. We cannot expect much. She's 99. So and that's just how life is. She's past her prime. So for us to ask her na pwede mo bang gawin to, she would say di ko na kaya. She's humble enough to say na hindi niya na kaya. In fact, if I may just share an anecdote, for the exhibition, I actually asked her to weave simple weave, an inunsoy, using cotton. And it's quite funny when I met her just before we started setting up. I told her, Lola, would you still be interested if I'll give you another cotton thread and weave me this pattern? Will you say yes? And then she just laughed and she said, if you, in Ilocano, if you only know how much time and how much effort it took me to weave it, because every now and then a thread snaps. But I'm just lucky that again ginamit na naman niya yon sa awa ng Diyos na itawid ko din. So she was able to weave 27 yards, and at the rate that we're going, that probably will be her last pure cotton in Abel work. So if you get the chance to see that in the exhibit, that would be very nice. So again, so yung mga impalagto, yung mga magagandang patterns niya ngayon, the one who's continuing it now are the weavers that she trained, which is actually good. Of course, it's sad that she can no longer do them, but again, that's how nature works. But it's nice that she was able to pass it on to the next generation of weavers, because that's how intangible heritage really works. It shouldn't be cast in time. It shouldn't just be a relic. It shouldn't be the case where pag pumanaw na si Lola, wala nang nakakagawa. It should be passed down from one generation to the other. Of course, the technical definition of an intangible heritage is that it should satisfy three things. Number one, it should be traditional. Number two, it should be living. And number three, it should be contemporary. And the way that things are being done in her community satisfies all of those things. The methodology and the patterns are traditional. It's living because even after Lola Magdalena Gamayo, marami ng weavers na nakakagawa ng ginagawa niya. And contemporary in a way that even some of the weavers nowadays can be considered as master weavers themselves. They can generate their own patterns inspired by older patterns before. We go on to the next slide. So the next photo basically shows you our tireless, dedicated unbelievable dedication talaga. Lola Magdalena Gamayo teaching children in her weaving center how to weave. Um, uh, there is a video that we will release in the exhibit that basically shows you the life of Magdalena Gamayo in a day. We asked the videographer to start as early as 4 a.m. because that's the time that she wakes up. And my idea back then was walang formal interview, walang orchestration, walang curation. It's basically stalking her. So, and true enough, tama yung sinabi ng mga kamag-anak niya. Nagigising na yan ng alas 4, nagwawalis sa labas, and then pag may ilaw na, maglalakad yan papunta sa kanyang loom at magsisimula. Pag mapapagod siya, babalik, magnanap. Kung kaya pa niya, babalik na naman. And that has always been her lifestyle. In fact, she told me that even when that her darkest days are the times that when she is really sick, that she cannot get up and she cannot do anything because she is just so used to weave something in a day, every day of her life. Dapat may ginagawa siya. Kahit gaano karami daw or gaano kaliit yung kanyang magagawa, at least sabi ni Izat, nasa dugo ko na kailangan kong maghabi. Yun yung kanyang salita. So that's Lola. These are recent photos. So she is already 99 when she was teaching them. So as you can see in one photo, she is basically inserting, it's not too obvious, but she's basically inserting the threads through the heddles. And that takes a lot of skills and good eyes para makita mo yung mga butas kung saan ipapasok yung mga thread. So we go on to the next big question. In the next slide, we go on to ask and to ask ourselves, what does it mean now that she's 99? Or better yet, what does it mean to you? What does it mean to all of us? Life is a gift. And sabi nga nila, kung malampasan mo ang 60, swerte ka na. Sa taong ito, nalampasan niya ang 60, nalampasan niya ang 70, nalampasan niya ang 80, 90, and she's going 100. That alone is a gift. And seeing that she is still vibrant, seeing that she's still active, sharp, very very retentive yung kanyang memory. If I ask her kumusta yung paano yung kanyang kabataan, she can vividly recall everything. In fact, Lola Magdalena Gamayo also went through difficulties in life. She lost her only son when he was at my age, so maaga. So in fact, walang direct descendant si Lola Magdalena Gamayo. The family that she considers now would be her nieces and nephews and grandnieces and grandnephews. It's such a pity that her line ends with her, but at least her knowledge and her craft doesn't. It goes on to the weavers that she basically taught them. So going back, what does it mean now that she's 99? At this point, she is the oldest national living treasure alive. And not only is she alive, she is still working. I don't know if anyone would be able to achieve that feat again. That's her personal achievement, and that's also an achievement for all of us. In the Philippines, traditional arts has always been pushed in the background. It's nice that we're having this renaissance now, that people have been keen in buying local fabrics and things like those. But sometimes I tell myself, sana mas deeper pa yung appreciation natin. Not just looking at how good they may look like in a dress or how good they may look like in a bag or shoes, but really understanding what the patterns mean to the weavers who made them, for example. What kind of skill sets were used in creating them. And that should give you a greater sense of pride. Again, as national living treasures, they are not only accountable to themselves, they are accountable to the community that they come from and the culture of the community where they come from. That's why they are called culture bearers. Hindi sila pwedeng gumawa-gawa ng kahit ano lang. it has to be consistent with their cultural background and cultural context. And corollary to that, that's why nagka-issue nga si Nas Daily noon. Kasi even when consent was a pseudo consent was taken from Fangod for her to teach in her in his online classes, the fact remains that it's not only Fangod who owns those patterns, the knowledge and the practice. She might be a practitioner, but she's not the owner of the culture of tattooing. So that's my occasion on, and that extends to other traditional arts. It's not just so when you buy something from Magdalena Gamayo or from any traditional artist, it's not just buying from the artist. It's basically buying from the community. It's basically getting a souvenir, a memento from that community. So that's how it is. Yung photo, yan yung kamay ni Lola Magdalena ni Lola ngayon. By the way, mahilig siya sa alahas. So again, she's a character too, you know. Always na maganda yung kanyang buhok, hindi siya lumalabas na nakalugay yung kanyang buhok. And we're just happy to have her at this time. And that's why when they said na let's have a national exhibition dedicated to Lola Magdalena Gamayo. And I was very fortunate. I take it as an honor that they chose me as the curator. I said that it's high time that we do it. Because if you look at it, again, let's just compare it with the national artists. The national artists get exhibited left and right. In a year, they probably get a show 24 times. They get exhibited abroad more than once a year. But for national living treasures, at best, they will be brought to trade shows. No more else. The last national living treasure to go out of the country were Lang Dulay and Salintamonon, 2 years after they were conferred. And the exposure that they got was a 3-day weaving demo in Washington, D.C. Not an exhibition of their work, basically just to show people how they weave. That was it. Has there been any national exhibition dedicated to a national living treasure? None yet, as far as I know. So this is the first time that we're doing it to Lola Magdalena Gamayo, and this is the first time that we're doing it to a national living treasure. And I hope that these are the kinds of events and celebrations that we will see more moving forward, not only to Magdalena Gamayo, but for the other national living treasure awardees. Last slide, please. So basically, my talk is just a preview. It basically is an introduction to the life and works of Lola Magdalena Gamayo. And I hope that in this talk, you were able to get an idea kung ano yung attitude niya. She's really simple, humble. Sometimes I even wonder if she really understands the gravity of her award. Kasi minsan tinanong ko nga sa kanya na parang, gusto mo bang malibing sa libingan ng mga bayani? Entitled ka doon. And sabi niya is that, hindi ko alam yan. No? I-ano nyo na lang ako, iligpit nyo na lang ako in the easiest way possible. You know, something that we talk as friends, candidly. So the Inubo na Dayaw String of Honor is the first exhibition of her work. It is held in the NCCA Gallery and it opens today, later this afternoon. It will be graced by Magdalena Gamayo herself, and the other national living treasures will also be gracing the event. So it will be a big event for the traditional arts scene in the Philippines. And again, I only have gratitude to be involved and to be able to collaborate with Lola Magdalena Gamayo, our national living treasure, our Inabel Master Weaver, and for me personally, a good friend of mine. Thank you for this talk, and thank you very much, Dr. Ekin. You've been very kind.
Okay, thank you so much, BJ, for that wonderful and very inspiring talk for CordiTex project this morning. So we now entertain some questions from our guests, from online, and we have some questions already passed on to us, BJ. Okay, so are you still there? Okay, let's start with the question from Jamie Cardenas. She said that she's a weaver and natural dye artist in the US whose grandmothers were weavers of Inabel Banawang in Santa Iloko Sur. And her grandmother was Maria Asuncion Galinato Cardenas, and she's wondering if Magdalena Galinato Gamayo is related to her grandmother. Baka you would know some info about it. BJ? Hi, BJ. Are you still there?
Oh, just one sec. Hello, ma'am. Sorry. Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry. Nakamute ako. That's an interesting question. But for the obviously, I don't know the relatives of Lola Magdalena Gamayo, but true, Galinato ang kanyang middle name, and I'd like to shed light on that because the Galinato family actually comes from Paway, and if our participant is interested, there is another Galinato personality that she might want to look at. Ami Galinato was a prolific musician. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, yung Tay Sangit Ti May Sang Ubing, tama po ba yun? It's actually composed by him. And he is also from Paway. So, the Galinato family is not really that big. So, maybe. It's difficult naman ako yung sasagot niya na magkamag-anak kayo, baka magbigay ako ng false hopes. But yes, it's nice that you were able to stress out na yung kanyang middle name is Galinato.
Okay,
So
maybe for the one who asked earlier, Miss Cardenas, you can get in touch with BJ. Maybe we can ask your email later, BJ, to connect you to these families. No, I know she's also a natural dye artist, and the grandmother baka may relations, no, in terms of the skill, the technology on natural dye, that you could connect to.
yes, po.
Okay,
Sure
so
thing po.
there's a question from Ray. He's asking, while weaving is typically women's work in South Cotabato, there are already a number of male Tiboli Tinalak weavers. Have you seen men go into Inabel weaving recently in Paway?
In Paway, yes. In
Yes.
fact, two of the best weavers that I'm dealing with are actually males. And but let's shed light on that. Actually, I think women are really natural weavers. Dr. Egan, I hope you will give me license in saying this. Kasi kung tutuusin mo, weaving for them, even the image of weaving is basically just like giving birth. It's giving life to something. You have plain threads in the foreground, but as it gets closer to you, and if you look at the anatomy of the loom, the movement in fastening the threads is towards the womb, and the textile comes out sa baba sa baba. So parang alam mo yon, it's like giving birth to the textile. And it's just amazing. I don't it's an observation that I was able to concoct na parang maybe it really is designed to be a women's work. It's giving birth. Papasok dito yung thread, lalabas papasok towards the womb, and lalabas yung finished product pababa. It's basically just as I said, the process of giving birth. Yes. In Ilocos, there are not many male weavers, but there are a few, especially those who really were raised and born in families na weaving din sila. What I've observed though is that that's why sinabi kong magagaling ang mga lalaki is because yung pag-fasten nila ng thread, kasi mas malakas yung kanilang force, mas compact yung kanilang weave. And mas mabilis silang gumalaw kaysa sa mga babae. But again, it's a very small minority. Probably in out of 40 weavers that I know, there are only 2 male weavers. So, but there are some apprentices ni Lola Magdalena Gamayo, and even in Abra, I've seen this, where male youth are being taught how to weave as well, and it seems like that they get that they get it, yeah, that they embrace it, and I just hope that they will continue doing it.
Thank you, BJ. In some communities like in Ifugao and of course in Abra, there are already male weavers, no, doing the entire process, no, of weaving their fabric. Okay, there are some questions also sent by our researchers and our project team, and they're asking about the technical part no, of your talk, no. So if Lola Magdalena first wove cotton in the past, would you identify when was the shift from cotton to polyester? And we understand that she had a difficult time in weaving cotton because it always snaps. So can you tell us probably about when was the shift, no, from cotton to polyester in terms of its weaving? Because that would be also an embodiment of this cotton planting and then eventually decline
Yes.
and eventually
Yes.
extinction of the cotton in Pawai.
Right. The first major how do you say that? The first major trouble in the use of cotton happened in World War II. When I told you na parang all the cotton plantations were decimated in the region, and of course at the time it was a time of turmoil. People cannot be in their houses; they have to abandon their houses. Some of their looms were even burned down. I mean, as you know, as you well know, most of the towns in Ilocos were burned down during World War II, including my town. That's why halos wala kang makitang lumang bahay. So that was the major obstacle. And after the World War, of course, instead of planting cotton, you would plant food because that's the more basic necessity. So medyo nawalan ng focus yung intercropping nila ng rice, corn, cotton, naging rice, corn, rice, corn, rice, corn na lang. And eventually it came to a point that people got disinterested. People thought na may mas matinding human needs tayong kailangang unahin kaysa sa paghahabi. Another obstacle, if I may just tell you how I understand it, another obstacle came in the 70s. And that was the time when the people who were able to get a good life abroad started sending things from abroad. And that was the time na naging uso ang mga stateside. And many weavers, not only Lola, share this. And even I think not only weavers, even Ilocanos share this, including my family. In fact, that's the frustration ng nanay ko, na parang nung nagsimula nang magpadala ng mga US-made blankets, ang mga kamag-anak, we basically treated our inabels as pamunas. Pag sira na, itapon na. And for the weavers, it also made a shift in terms of their attitude na parang back then they love cotton, and then nung nakita nilang mas manipis yung galing abroad, mas malamig daw kasi mainit daw ang inabel, they just preferred using commercial blankets, and that also has an effect on their motivation to weave. Bakit pa kami magpapakahirap na tatahin ng makakapal na Abel kung pwede namang bumili na lang, magpabili na lang ako kay kuya sa States. Ganon yung attitude. And then, of course, with the scarcity of Inabel, the material that filled in the gaps were commercialized polyester threads coming from China. And I think that this really spelled the big difference. Not only is it that it was so accessible to get, I mean, as you can see nowadays, go online, go to Shopee, you have thousands of sellers, but it also saved them from the pre-weaving process, which is really tedious. Yung pagtigbi, or what we call the hand spinning, how they separate the seeds from the cotton, how they spin them to make the threads, the entire process, yung kanilang paggawgaw. There's a term for it. It presently escapes me. So yun yung attitude nila na parang why would we go through the process if we could just buy threads na madaling gawin? Of course, who wants to make their lives difficult, you know? So that was the biggest blow. And as I told you, that attitude was perpetrated for decades, from the 70s, 80s, 90s. pakonti ng pakonti ang production natin ng cotton. And in fact, in our conversation on in Dr. Amores when we first met, she was asking me, marami pa bang nagpo-produce ng cotton sa Paway? And I told her, one or two weavers are the only ones who are faithful and medyo naive na cotton lang yung gusto nila. The rest, it's largely polyester cotton or pure polyester na. And again, sometimes I cannot blame them. Aside from the fact that it's readily available, I feel that I think that the weavers also like that they can choose more colors. Number one, and number two, it's so easy it is for them to weave. It does not break, and the time that it's spent in weaving is so much faster because threads, polyester threads, are smoother. And for some reason, it also this is an observation, Dr. Ikin. And for some reason, even the buyers, if you show them cotton and if you show them polyester, kung hindi mo sasabihin sa kanila kung asan yung cotton and polyester, they probably would like the polyester more. So there's this big shift in mindset, and I think it will be a long journey for us to try to rectify it. That's why sometimes kung in my personal dealing in textile, I always try to emphasize na ganito ang cotton. Ang cotton is hindi madulas, it's coarse. And sabi nila, bakit coarse? Hindi dapat. Dapat ganito, malambot. Because yun na yung nakasanayan. I think that's the problem. It's because it's the nakasanayan.
Okay, thank you, BJ, for that. No, so in relation to cotton, we have seen the textiles of Lola Magdalena about this very colorful use of threads. No, so the other question from our chemist is about the natural dye that it's being used. No, so again, did Lola Gamayan work on dyed threads before, or is this color coming from the polyester that was being brought in the 70s?
Yes. Lola Magdalena, in her younger years, grew up to a culture that did samraw. Samraw is dyeing. That's the Ilocano term for it. And as you can see, ang kanilang color noon is limited to few colors. You have black for the tabble weave. I'm until now di ko pa rin alam kung ano yung English name niya. They use yellow from either langka or turmeric. They use green for patani for some reason. I don't know which part of the patani, but they said that they use patani for the green. And they use apatot for color brown to red. So they did use that. But again, it's dyeing is really a dying art. Aside from Abra, I don't know who else who does it. Maybe our friend and attendee from the US. But again, it's also, as I've said, many people are find these pre-weaving procedures too tedious, so they don't do that anymore. But again, in the history of Lola Magdalena's communities weaving, yes, they did use natural dyes before.
Yeah, because I could see some of your samples, like the inunsoy. That's actually, if I may, well, I suspect that's a natural dye and pure cotton. I could see
Yes,
the
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
color and other things, while the others I could recognize it as really
Yes, ma'am.
polyester.
If you will, if you remember po yung tatlong binakol na pinakita ko, yung indigo and the black na ginamit, those are natural dyes. Yung colored na threads na lang, they use Bonel for that one.
Oh, I see. So there's a combination of
It's a combination, yes.
threads. Okay, so another concern about the weave design and patterns, no, from our technical team. We see that binakol is not only found in Paway, Ilocos Norte, they are also shared design with the one in Ilocos Sur and also the one in Abra. So in this kind of example, no, a case study with Lola's weaving, what makes the inabel of Iloko in Paway distinct from the binakol of, let's say, in Ilocos Sur, no? And also the one in Abra? What makes
It's
it?
really difficult. That's really difficult. I mean, it's basically the way I interpret questions like that kasi it's basically the same as asking saan nanggaling yung pinakbet,
Yeah.
and it's something that's shared across the Ilocos region, and it's just so happened that Binacol is really a pan Ilocano and even Tingyan weave. So that's really a difficult question to ask, kung ano yung difference kasi all the motifs, I'm not I'll try to differentiate motifs and patterns here. The motifs are generic. It's shared. You have kusikos, you have palid, you have squares, you have cross. But the way they render it, I think that's where the differences come from. Each weaver will have her own interpretation of things. As I've said, one weaver can combine two patterns in one design field. Another weaver can put lines to separate the quadrants of the palid. Another weaver can experiment on materials, such as, for example, in the case of the three oldest blankets that Lola Magdalena Gamayo has, it's not only cotton, but she also used bonel. So I think doon tayo nagkakaroon ng differences. Of course, as much as I would like to be biased towards Ilocos Norte, that would be unfair if I say na parang kusikos comes from us. I'm sure maraming magagalit dyan. But then again, and I think that should be the type of sophistication that we should also be looking at, not only as researchers, but also as textile buyers. What exactly makes this kusikos different from the other kusikos that are present
Mm.
out there? And it takes a certain level of connoisseurship. I'm sure there should be a more castle word for it, pero yun yung unang pumasok sa isipan ko.
Thank you, BJ, for that. No, so if I may just like to interject about because we have in the CordiTex we have samples from Tinggan or Itneg in Abra. We have samples from the Ilocos, and we also have sample of Lola Magdalena's Binacol, no? So what we observe from the Paway area, especially for her weaving, is that it's minuscule. Maliliit yung patterns niya. And if you go to Ilocos, they are bigger magnified versions of Binacol. And then
Right.
if you go to Abra, it's also different, no? So I think maybe this is just our hypothesis as a project team, is the size of the loom, probably because yung kanyang loom is maliit, no, as you have presented.
Maliit, 18 inches. Yes
Yeah,
po.
but it's very admirable how you can actually put this binacol design into a minuscule miniature pattern, no? So for me, that is most admirable, no?
Yes,
In the
ma'am.
samples in the US museums, and also the one in I think in Germany, in Berlin, the ethnological museum, we have seen samples of binacol as small as 1 peso coin.
Nice.
This was a sample of 1900s, no? So I was just looking at her binacol earlier, parang lumaki din, no? But in fact, there are samples as small as 1 peso. Yung binacol
I
na
can imagine. I can imagine.
so
There
it's
is
very
one. Yes, ma'am. In fact, ma'am, there is one binacol na exhibit ngayon in one panel. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8
amazing.
circles. So, if I may just show, meron akong dala, meron akong ano niya ngayon. It's actually her latest weave. It's a binacol in pink. So this is just 18 inches. But as you can see, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 circles.
Yeah. So yeah, probably, yeah, thank you for that, BJ. No,
Mhm.
so it's amazing skill really to put all of this binacol design in 7, 9 circles, no. And maybe if there's a chance, we could probably show this photograph to Lola if she could she could attempt not to weave that. Pero of course, like you said, we're not really forcing her to weave, but to uh, show the patterns.
Kakayanin pa natin yan.
Yeah, we have some of those, no, actually being we have photographs of the old samples from 1900s. Okay, so we have other questions here. Yeah, we talked about these influences and confluences, no? Did Lola actually had engagement or encounters with other weavers outside of Pawai that inspired her to do a different version or a new version or a kind of innovation of her textile patterns?
This is inconclusive, but it would be a conjecture, ma'am. Lola Magdalena Gamayo, although she is from the town of Pinili, I just have to clarify that pala. Pinili used to be part of Pawai, but now Pinili is its own municipality. She is so far away from the center that she is actually closer to the town of Nueva Era, which is a Tingyan territory.
Mm.
In fact, sabi nga niya sa akin, kung pupunta kaming mamamalengke, hindi sa bayan namin, sa Nueva Era na. So maybe somewhere along the lines with her interactions with the Tingyans. And while it's true that the Tingyans are not weavers, they're basically embroiderers, maybe there were some influences, but that's yet to be identified pa. Again, yung kanyang fascination towards agricultural motifs. I mean, Indians usually use a lot of agricultural motifs in their embroidery, and maybe her penchant for sticking to that kind of worldview is also influenced by the Indians.
Thank you, BJ. Okay, so we have another question about the cultural appropriation of her designs, no? So we know in the CordiTex, we observe how master weavers work actually by looking at the patterns, no? They can actually like photograph that from memory and reweave that in their loom. So what are your comments, or what could be the thoughts of Lola regarding the appropriation of designs, no? So sometimes let's say the example of the Nal Alson, no? So we can see that being woven also in some parts of the Cordillera or other weavers in Ilocos Sur or somewhere in Abra. What is your comment on that kind of, appropriation or misappropriation of the designs from Pawai?
Ako naman kasi again, I think I come from the orientation that as I've said a while ago, the patterns are not necessarily her own. It's not like trademark na sa kanya. And probably even before, some people are doing various renditions of the XOXO na. I guess the bigger question is that, what do we do with her works? If I may just rephrase po yung question, na parang, in fact, there have been cases before that, without naming names, there was a fashion line before, a brand that had a Magdalena Gamayo line. And it came to a point that the NCCA had to get into the picture because it was so obvious that it's really not from her. Based from the designs and based from interviews, they don't source from her. So they issued a memo asking them to explain why the name is being used, when in fact it does not in any way benefit the weaver at all. And suffice to say, they did not respond. Ayun. So definitely, as national living treasures, in fact, inventory yung kanilang mga gawa. It's documented kung kanino pupunta, meron silang listahan. So at least we could trace kung saan napunta yung mga gawa nila. And especially now, I think that the Gamaba will become more possessive of her works. There are discussions of whether or not ibebenta ba yung mga works niya, or should the government monopolize and acquire all of them? Because after all, we don't know how long she will still last. And we don't want it to happen yung nangyari sa mga weavers down south. Like, for example, in the case of Salintamonon, when she died, the family only had one sample of her work. And that's it. Nothing else remains. So we would like to definitely avoid that eventuality again. So I think that's the move. Um, uh, uh, yeah, ang hirap mag-comment about cultural appropriation. Marami akong kaibigan na fashion designers.
Yeah.
But
Okay, thanks, BJ.
but I guess just to in broad strokes po no. I guess the beauty of Inabel ito na lang on the safe side na lang ako Miss Universe sagot. On the safe side, I guess the beauty of Inabel compared to for example Ifugao weaves and Southern Mindanao weaves is that again they're versatile. They are really meant for dresses. They're really meant to be worn. They are for practical uses. Unlike, for example, in Ifugao, you have a lot of cultural sensitivities and sensibilities that you need to respect. Ito ba ay isang burial shroud? Ito ba ay ginagamit pangkasal lang? And I'm sure you've heard this that there was this one fashion show before that ang ginamit nilang damit is isang burial shroud, and it really made such a mess. At least what I can say is that the chances for those mistakes to happen for Inabel is lesser. Because again, it's meant for practical use talaga. That's why tama yung description ni Dr. Uh, ah, pangalan niya ulit ni Dr.
Norma Respi.
Norma Respicio. Yes, that Inabel is highly usable and it's very versatile. It's not too complicated.
Thank you, BJ. We have more questions from our chat box. No, so there's a question from Diwa Malaya. She's asking, what are the future plans of the Inubon Adayo exhibit after the installation in NCCA? And this is also my related question regarding the care of the textiles, no, that were made by our national living treasure. So, are there plans for this in terms of the conservation, and what will happen after the exhibition?
Definitely the
First,
Gamaba collection
okay.
stays. Yes po. Definitely the Gamaba collection will stay with the Gamaba. Which is the NCCA. It's the award-giving body. They need to have an inventory of her work. So the works that are on display comes from the collection of the Gamaba or the National Living Treasure Committee. The three blankets which I was able to ask her to lend will go back to her because that's what she wants. She does not, sabi nga niya is that ito na lang yung natitira kong mga lumang kumot. Kasi in fact there's an anecdote there again. Sabi niya sa akin, that's why walang natirang kumot na marami sa akin is because sa tagal na at sa tagal ng buhay ko, sa haba ng buhay ko, lahat ng nagawa ko napamigay ko na as pabaon sa mga nauna na sa akin. And I'm sure you do that
Yeah.
too in Ilocos Sur. Like one of the most important pabaon sa patay for us Ilocanos are not really their jewelry, are not really their favorite food or whatever. It has to be a kumot. And yun yung sabi ni Lola sa akin na parang 99 na ako. You could just imagine kung ilan ng classmates ang nauna sa akin, ilan ng mga kamag-anak ang nauna sa akin. And each time, I feel obliged na ako yung magbigay ng kumot nun.
Okay, thank you.
So, tatlo na lang yung natitira.
Oh, wow.
And sabi niya sa akin is, she'd like to have them back and we respect that.
Okay.
As for future plans, knock on wood, we are discussing with one Philippine consulate abroad who actually showed interest in rerunning the exhibit. Hello, Citadel, kung andyan ka. um, so yeah, there have been expressions that they want to do it outside as well, especially in areas that have large Filipino Ilocano communities. And I was also asking Dr. Amores if she would like to reshow it in Baguio because the Gamaba is also willing to
Of
do it
course.
elsewhere.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's another question about again from Diwa, no? So Manong BJ, can you also share a summary of your Inabel journey? How did you started and where do you see it going, no, from your textile research?
I started. Okay, I come from a weaving family. In fact, my aunt, the cousin of my mom, was the one who actually revitalized Inabel in Pawai. She was already a U.S. citizen. She came back in 1991. because she's a weaver herself and started the cooperative, and it's the oldest weaving cooperative probably in Region 1. She passed away recently, sadly. And so it has always been somewhere there. Nandyan lang parate. I'm surrounded by weavers. As I told you, the oldest blanket at home is done by my great-great-grandmother, and we still use it. That's how sturdy Inabel is, given the right material and given the right thread count. So, but yung pagiging technical, if I may say so, or yung talagang pagiging curious ko talaga sa Abel. My friend Shireen here is with us, and kami yung sabay na nagka-interest ng Inabel nung board kami nung pandemic. Nagsimula yan sa unang question na may gawa ka ba ni Nana Magdalena? At sabi ko, meron. Tapos sabi niya, may gawa ka ba nilang Dulay? Sabi ko, meron. And then sabi niya, bakit hindi tayo mag-collect ng gawa ng mga gamaba? And it all started there. And I guess I just took the extra mile by medyo ganun yung ugali ko. If I really get interested in something, or if I really get passionate into something, I really dig deep into it. There was a time that I got fascinated in wine, so now I can, I could differentiate the taste of the grapes, and I think that's the level of appreciation ko ngayon, na parang unang tingin ko pa lang sa isang Abel, medyo alam ko na, oy, may mali siya, oy, cotton to, oy, gawang Iloko to. Medyo it's something that you get to acquire over time, and so it's a passion, it's an interest, but it somehow developed deeper. And I'm also lucky that when I was starting my serious textile journey, I was also surrounded by people who are really knowledgeable. I mean, Dr. Ike Namores was there early on. Floyd Quintos guided me in sourcing the best specimen from different cultural groups. So I'm just really fortunate that the timing is right, and the conditions were there. And how does this go? It seems like, as I've said, there is a growing interest in Philippine weaving right now, not only in the Philippines, but also outside. In fact, my largest market for good textiles are actually from the US. So it's happening on a global scale, and I hope that's it gets sustained, because as I've said, um, we've we've put these in the background for the longest time. It came to a point that people were so ashamed to wear Inabel, na parang ang term dyan sa Ilocano is, oy, nag-udong, or parang, oy, napaka-backward mo, napaka villager mo. But nowadays, even the Socialin wears Inabel. So I think it's a good direction. But of course, as I've said, apropos to cultural appropriation, it has to be handled carefully then.
Thank you, BJ, for that. No, so we have more questions. I hope you can spare a few more minutes to respond to our queries. Yes, so there's a question from Danny Florendo. She is, thank you for this insightful and interesting talk. She worked with teachers in far IP communities, such as in Balbalan, Kalinga. They integrated IP knowledge, such as weaving and agriculture, to the children as part of their education. And she's asking if there are schools in communities there in Ilocos or in Pawai that teach or at least talk about weaving tradition, or if there are any organizations that implement this as a norm. Yan. BJ?
Yes, thank you po. Part of the mandate of the National Living Treasure awardees is that they have to pass on their skills to the next generation. In fact, their weaving centers are declared as a school of living traditions. So Nana Magdalena Gamayo's weaving center is a school of living tradition, and that's the reason why students are free to go to learn. Walang limit, anyone can learn. In fact, ang kanyang oldest na apprentice is already in her 50s.
Oh.
And they're open. If I'm not mistaken, even in Abra, in Peñarubia, there is a school of living tradition for the dye weaving. So it's part of the total package, that it has to be transmitted, it has to be descended, it has to be passed on to the next generation. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, the SLT, the School of Living Tradition of the Philippines, is actually declared as a masterpiece of oral and intangible heritage of humanity by UNESCO. They really take pride in that initiative. And the model in the Philippines is one of the best ones one can find in Southeast Asia.
Okay, thank you, BJ. There's a question from Ray Makapagal. So sadly, there are Gamaba awardees who no longer have examples of their work in their own houses or training centers. How can we ensure that their families may still be able to exhibit their works?
Exactly. That's my concern a while ago. That's something that we would like to avoid happening to Lola Magdalena Gamayo. Especially after the exhibit, I can just imagine many people will be flocking, bidding yan. I'm sure na parang, hi Lola, magkano yan? We're willing to pay, and there are some crazy buyers who are willing to pay 5,000 per yard. I can just imagine, and that's true. To give you a clear example, Yabing Masalan Dulo, the one who passed away 3 years ago, the master weaver for Mabaltabi, Blaan, the family only possesses 3 extant original works done by her. For Salintamonon, one of the first national living treasures, Bagaba Tagabawa Bogobo, isa lang yung work na titira sa kanyang family. And again, we also have to look at it in the context of their circumstances. Again, they are not national artists who earn millions. They are national living treasures who probably earn, I don't know, $10 for a work that they did for a month. So kailangan nilang magpalabas because that's their main sources of income. They don't think about, and as I've told you, sometimes they don't, it's not that they are ignorant, I don't want that to come across like that, but because they are so humble, hindi pumapasok sa isipan nila yung titles nila. So for them, it's like, sige, gawa ko to. May gustong bumili, sige, kunin nyo na para may pangkain ako sa pamilya ko. So in fact, in the last days of Ambalang Ausalin, and Dr. Ikin knows this, when she was already getting ill, may mga pinatakbo din sa akin na gawa niya. And I thought, kaysa mapunta sa iba, sige, kunin ko na lang. I bit the bullet. Para lang, I just feel safer na, okay, kaysa mapunta abroad or kaysa mapunta sa iba tapos gagawin lang sapatos. At least mas kampante ako na parang it will remain as it is na headscarf siya. And maybe when I'm older, I could donate it to a museum or something else. Ayun, we're trying to mitigate that eventuality. And that's the reason why we're also trying to trace kung saan pumupunta talaga yung mga works niya. Because it will be an issue of provenance later on. Many people will just claim na parang, oy, gawa to ni Magdalena Gamayo, but in fact, it's not. And we've seen that happening now with the one clothing brand that I was able to share a while ago, that they heavily use Magdalena Gamayo's name, but in fact, none of them are, or at least most of them are not really hers.
Yeah, I think the name itself is already a brand name, no? Which is again sad too. Well, good in the other hand, but at the same time, there's a downside to that one. BJ, we have a comment or a question from the Committee on North Luzon of the House of Representatives, no? I think she's from the Congress, is set to conduct a meeting with DTI, DOST, and NCCA on the promotion of the local weaving industry of the northern regions, such as Region 1 and 2 and CAR. In line with this, she would like to inquire the possible government intervention that we should tap for the preservation and promotion of our Inabel industry. Do you have thoughts or recommendations for this committee for this kind of in relation to the preservation and promotion of Inabel industry in Iloko?
Yes. We go to the let's go back to the pretext that weaving nowadays, it's largely livelihood driven. That's the motivation why we teach in fact, even communities na walang weaving background, we try to introduce weaving to them as a form of livelihood program to empower them. And of course, empowering and giving livelihood is a noble thing. I have nothing against that. But I think that there has been a practice by the DTI and the DOST, and I hope I'm at the liberty to say this, that the cultural boundaries are sometimes blurred when they just teach a certain community a certain weaving technique, a certain pattern of which is totally not connected to their identity. And in some cases, these are techniques and patterns that are distinct to a particular community. And so it dilutes cultural boundaries. It dilutes the identities of those who really own the pattern and own, or at least, take a greater weight or meaning of the techniques that are being used. Like there was one time that I found out that a certain town was being taught sinukitan, and sinukitan for the longest time has always been paway. It's just paway, and it differs from pinilian in a way that it's wala siyang horror vacui. It enjoys wide open spaces in as much as it enjoys the patterns. In Pinilian, it's usually always largely continuous weft yan. Yung buong textile puno ng pattern. For Paway, it's pato-patok. And then I found out na parang, oh, okay, they're teaching that now. So how should I, for one, react as a textile collector? And number two, how do I react as a pawayanyo myself, who actually works closely with the few remaining Sinukitan weavers? Probably there are only 14 Sinukitan weavers in Paway. It's isolated in one barangay. And that's where I would suggest na parang when we try to use traditional arts as a form of livelihood. I mean, it differs naman kasi kung pagkain yung tinuturo, I guess walang issue yan, madali lang. Magturo ka ng paggawa ng puto, that's easy. But if you're trying to teach them weaving, I think that the cultural aspect of the weave should not be extracted away from the equation. It should always be there. Because again, it's not just at the material, it's also the knowledge, and it's also the sense of connection that the people have on the patterns that they've created. So, and I think that it's just courtesy and respect to be able to kowtow to those things.
Okay, thank you, BJ. We're beyond, but thank you for this interesting discussion. No, I have only one last question. No, are the technique, patterns, motifs being coded? No, yung mga hinahabi ni Lola, are these coded in pen and paper, or it's just from oral memory or history? Because one of the goals of CordiTex is to really preserve the weave, no? And one way of doing that is to code it and then reweave that, no, for future generations. So
Yes, ma'am.
is this a project you intend to do, or my number one question is, are they coded or written down? The second is, are they also like in the form of digitization? Are you thinking of that particular process, or is the community open to that kind of idea of technological preservation?
Sige, unahin natin yung last question. Are they open to documenting? Yes. Is there an existing inventory of works of Magdalena Gamayo? Yes. At the time of her awarding conferral, all her works had to be documented. But as I told you, Lola Magdalena is very playful. Her patterns are not stuck in time. So a certain tawa-tawa can be just plain tawa-tawa, and next thing you know, meron ng lines. Next thing you know, meron ng X. Next thing you know, meron ng bola-bola in the same design field. So documenting the actual textiles that comes out from her would probably be a book length. Kasi kagaya ngayon, she's only weaving kusikos, but in different sizes, in different permutations, in different numbers of squares. I don't know how technical we could get, pero those could probably merit one identifying code. But yeah, to say the least, ma'am, there is a broad inventory. But definitely, even I would have to say that it's not complete.
I think BJ, that's your next project for documentation, and then probably write a book, or if not in a full-length book form, it could be a storybook just to introduce her to our audiences, or of course from others who doesn't know this kind of weaving, no, in Pawai, no. Kasi the reason why I mentioned that, because one of the best way to document your weaving tradition is to write about it, no, in book
Yes, ma'am.
format, in pamphlet, or whatever form. Basta may record na hawak yung community. That's one way of copywriting it, you know, documenting it in book form. Kasi in 10 years, we never know what will happen. No? In the
Yes.
next 20 years, we don't know if this weaving will not be woven anymore. Although we know, we are aware that she has a weaving workshop in Pawai, and there are also some weavers now in the workshop. But of course, for preservation in the future, no, we don't know what will happen. I mean, the
Yes.
evolution of this later on. Okay, I think we covered all the questions, so many questions. O may pahabol pang isa? Okay, meron. Agree daw sila dun sa sinabi mo at sinabi ko. Okay, thank you so much, BJ. Do you have some last words to our audience, or we have audiences from Hawaii, US, Indonesia, Australia, and others, no, who have come to attend this talk?
Thank you very much for attending this talk. Even if we only started promoting this talk like a week ago, it really was rushed. So I'm happy that the turnout came very well. We're 40 strong in attendance. I'd like to invite you to the exhibit, not because it's my work, but it's because it basically is probably the most accessible way for you to appreciate the works of the National Living Treasure herself. It's open for the whole month of October. It's going to be in Intramuros, and if you have time later this afternoon, she will be gracing the occasion. Meron akong postcard na ginawa as part of the exhibition memorabilia, and you could ask her to sign it if you want. Inabel, there's nothing new about Inabel, to be honest. It has always been there, but I guess more than anything, we need to appreciate it more. And it's not only the Inabel that we should appreciate. It's also the people behind them. It's also the communities behind them. It's also about the histories behind them. It's not enough for us to just say na parang, ay, may Inabel ako. But it's also look at how it affects the other people, the value chain, kung baga. Does it make me more Filipino? Does it add to my being Filipino? Does it help in preserving the culture? And more importantly, does it respect the culture? I think yun yung biggest question doon. And I just hope that we bear those in mind moving forward.
All right. Thank you so much, BJ, for that very inspiring and insightful and enabling talk this morning. I hope our audience and this recording will also be played in our CordiTex website coming out soon. So you could re-listen to this one and be inspired. Okay. Thank you so much, BJ, for your time, and all the best in the opening. So if you are in Manila, please go to Intramuros ground floor. It will be opening what time, BJ?
4 p.m. po.
4 p.m., no? And then hopefully we can have that exhibit in Baguio, hopefully next year. Thank you so much, BJ, and thank you to our audience who have attended this webinar. Next month, we'll talk about the Itnug Ilocano confluences on traditional weaving. So we will have Malot Ingel from the National Museum in Vigan to talk about these connections. No? So this is related also to the Iloko Inabel of Pawai. So thank you very much and have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.